All right. All right. Hello, everybody. It looks like we've got some people filtering in. So while everyone's joining us, I will just go ahead with a short introduction before we get going this evening. My name's Morgan. I'm an AmeriCorps member with Conservation Nebraska, the Common Ground program. Tonight we have Bob Henrickson, which I'm sure we are all well aware and excited. I know plant talks are always really great, and I'm looking forward to another good one. Tonight we're going to be going over edible landscapes at home, plants to plant. You guys will notice that your camera and microphones for you personally are turned off. We're going to give all our attention to Bob here. Everything will be recorded, so if anybody misses anything, we should have this up on our Conservation Nebraska YouTube page. I would say in the next couple of weeks, maybe look for that if you do want to go back and rewatch anything. For any questions you have, go ahead and fill them into the chat or the Q&A section, and then Bob will just periodically be able to go through those as we're going over our presentation this evening. And then towards the end of our presentation, if we don't mind, we are going to launch a poll. It allows us to get feedback from our attendees, just lets us know what we're doing well, what could be done better. We want to hear what you're learning about, and it lets us continue to do these events. So with that, I will hand it over to Bob, and we will get started.
Okay, thank you very much, Morgan, and welcome everybody. I'm glad to be joining you on such a frigidly cold night. We'll look at pictures of green, right, of summer to kind of bring warmth into our lives. I appreciate you joining us, and I appreciate Conservation Nebraska having me on once again. I'll tell you, with edible plants for the landscape plants you should plant, there's going to be some repeats here because some of the plants I'm going to be talking about are indeed plants that are also out there in the wild, meaning they're native plants. Some were introduced, but bottom line is there will be some repeats, and that's okay, right? Always learning more about plants. And just want to invite you, you can go to YouTube and type in, we did a series called Wild Edible Plants of Nebraska with Conservation Nebraska, and it's a 3-part series. So I invite you to check that out as well because yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there. We needed 3 parts to get through all the different plants. And just a quick plug, if you are not familiar, I'd like you to join me on How's It Growing? It's a weekly talk show on KZUM, Lincoln's community radio station, 89.3 FM. You can, if you're outside of the Lincoln area, you can listen online at kzum.org, or in town, you can listen to kzum.org. That's every Wednesday, 11 till noon. And this picture you see is a wild edible plant hike we do at Wilderness Park in mid-April every year, and it's already booked. So a lot of people are interested in wild edible plants. But if you go to that YouTube video, you don't even have to go on the hike. You just will have all that great information for you. All right, so when you think of edible landscaping, right, you envision vegetable gardens, right? And man, that has to be a big part of it, in my opinion. But if you can convert the areas around your vegetable garden into fruiting shrubs and herbs and things like that, you know, those typical landscape plantings have little use to wildlife or people. But if you're planting an edible garden and you miss out on harvest, well, at least you're benefiting wildlife, right? So it's for both us and wildlife, there's plenty to share. And I think it's just a great thing that we all need to do. We're very good at growing grass, it seems, in our landscapes. We got to get good at growing food again. That's for sure. Edible landscapes can be just as attractive as ornamental landscapes, in my opinion. What's wrong with looking at some collard greens, right? Growing in a landscape. How cool is that? Heck, that could be a zucchini plant. It could be eggplant, whatever. Lots of different options for you to choose to make your edible landscape. It used to be called integrated gardening, where you're integrating vegetables right in with your landscape plants. And I would say you got to be conscientious about your vegetable plants tend to need more water than your landscape plants. So site them accordingly, right? So I wouldn't put my vegetable garden plants in with my prairie garden plants, in other words. because I have prairie garden plants because I don't want to have to water them, right? So be thinking of that. This is kind of a slide to show you my ideal. So if there's anybody listening out there, there's no landscape companies out there in the world. There needs to be, where you're providing consultation to your clients, exploring options to transform a property. You're doing the design for them, working with their budget and making a multi-layered site plan, installing and maintaining the design, keeping the garden tidy and productive, and you're coaching and educating, helping the clients learn about year-round gardening skills needed for an abundant harvest. And of course, you can also teach them about ways to preserve their harvest. Wouldn't it be cool if we had landscape companies out there that did that? Because a lot of folks are saying, I don't have time to garden. I got 4 young kids. When the heck am I going to find the time? I think gardening is living. You just have to prioritize what's important to you in life. Okay, so let's talk about some plants that I think you should put in your landscape. Now, looking at this picture, what is that group of trees right there? The trivia question here. We don't have to put it in the chat, but okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Maybe you guessed that tropical looking leaf, and you can see it's a suckering group of trees right there. Those are pawpaws growing in their natural environment at Waubunsie State Park down in their picnic area. And those are just lots of stems taking place there. It grows as a thicket in nature. So not just one stem of a tree, but multiple stems. And it'll do that in your landscape as well. It will form a thicket. And you want to plant it accordingly, where your pawpaw is kind of owning that area and letting it sucker as much as it wants and becoming a thicket. We'll talk about pawpaws more here in a little while. But first, I want to talk about the shadblow serviceberry. The shadblow, my oh my, if you know serviceberry, you love them. And they have this early spring flower blooming before the leaves emerge. You can see the leaves are just starting to emerge on this picture here to the right. But they grow multi-stemmed like a small tree, maybe 15 to 20 feet tops. And shadblow is not quite native to Nebraska, a couple states away, but boy, it does well here. And it can take full sun and will fruit better in full sun. But in full sun, you want to give it a little irrigation when we have extreme drought conditions. These two with this wonderful pumpkin red fall color are sited underneath the shadow of these pine trees. Now they're limbed way up, as you can see, so it's letting morning light in and afternoon light. Perfect for a Juneberry. But I can tell you, these aren't going to fruit as heavy as they would in full sun. Here is something that was written way back in 1903 by Jules Sandoz, the famed Old Pioneer, or not Old Pioneers, that was Willa Cather. Maury Sandoz wrote Old Jules, that's right. And so this is something that was written about way back in 1903. They ought to be a berry for the Northwest. Now he's talking about the Northwest part of the state. No farmer ought to fail to plant a patch. I have just distributed free wagon loads of plants from my early plantings. So he was planting them out there in the middle of nowhere in the Nebraska sandhills, and the plants were doing well enough where he was harvesting free wagon loads of the plants. Didn't understand why people weren't planting this native fruit. And you notice the fruit in that previous cluster, they're kind of reddish. That's usually when the robins are getting them, and they frustrate the heck out of us humans because the robins usually beat us to the harvest. Some people will cover their plants with a bird netting, and I would recommend doing that if you want to beat the robins. That's why shadblow is good, because it's not too tall. You can get on a step ladder and put a bird netting over it. Or if we just had enough of them around, the birds can't get them all. Anyway, the berries turn this beautiful dark color, and that's when they're at their prime and their sweetest. And if you just eat one Juneberry, it's not doing it justice. You got to eat like 8 at once to really get the lovely juice. And what do they taste like? I tell you what, they taste like Juneberries. People try to describe the flavor. They don't really taste like anything else. They're so good, though. All right, I see a comment from Misty West. Earth Sculptures in Omaha does those things. I've seen videos where he planted pawpaws. His social media has turned towards a different focus of his, but his website is earthsculptures.com. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to know. All right. Okay, why are you stuck? There we go. Juneberry fruits are very nutritious. Now, we all know blueberries, dark colored berries are very good for us, right? High in antioxidants. And Juneberries are no exception. And this is our harvest probably last year. And we won't take the individual berries off. We just pluck off the cluster of berries and drop them in the bucket, and we'll deal with peeling them off those stems later. In fact, I freeze them like this, stem and all, because then when I pull them out of the Ziploc bag, they just pop right off those stems really easy because they are soft, they're hard, they take some work to harvest. But boy, you can see how good they are for you, just loaded with lots of goodies that only really native fruits can provide. And it's a great plant for the landscape as well. Even squirrels love Juneberries. The fruit was highly valued, fresh or cooked as a sauce. That was probably the main use for it, but they were also dried for winter use, and it dries very well. I can speak of that from experience. You can dry them just like you would for raisins or dried currants or something like that, mixed with dried buffalo meat. So they basically mixed equal parts dried Juneberries with equal part dried buffalo meat and tallow or fat to make pemmican. Today we would call those energy bars. But that pemmican, that storage quality of that pemmican, we're talking decades. It will last. And I read of some dude online that he had a 10-year-old piece and it tasted just as good as the day he made it. The fruit is delicious eaten fresh, used in pies, jams, muffins. Basically, think of how you would use blueberries. That's how you would use Juneberries. And it does make a nice wine as well. Juneberry fruit leather, if you Google that, there's a recipe online from Forager Chef, and that's a great site to follow. Juneberry fruit leather has a rich jammy flavor, punctuated with a little crunch from the seeds. So when you eat a Juneberry, they have little seeds inside, much like you would crunch the seeds of a strawberry or a raspberry or a mulberry, right? But what's funny is when you crunch the seeds of a Juneberry, it gives it an almond-like aftertaste. So you get this rich, fruity flavor initially, kind of little apple overtones to me, and then followed by some almond aftertaste. So this is a traditional method of preserving the fruit, and it's easy to make. You just basically mash up the fruit and add a little maple syrup or honey to it to sweeten it a little bit, and make a fruit leather out of it, and lasts a long time. And if that isn't enough for you, if you just look up Juneberry recipes online, holy moly, people, there's lots of different Juneberry recipes, like lots of ways to get creative with them. Juneberry rhubarb pie is one way I love to use them. That's my pie right there. And I call it the best pie on the planet. Okay, now let's talk about pawpaws. So there is a cluster of pawpaws growing from a tree in my yard. I have two trees in my yard, and it took a solid 10 years before I started to get good fruit. So you have to be patient, 7 to 10 years. And Rome wasn't built in a day, right? But if you were to plant an apple this spring, it'd probably be at least 5 to 7 before you got any apples. So it takes time for all this stuff. This picture you see on the left is a pawpaw that I planted. This is a church here in Lincoln at 41st and Sumner. And, or no, I'm sorry, around 44th and Sumner in that area. And out in full blazing sun. And a lot of people think pawpaws have to be planted in the shade. They tolerate shade, but they also do equally well in full sun. They're very drought tolerant. They're tough. I think for better fruiting, you want to give them at least a half day of sun, if not 2/3 to 3/4 day sun. You know, giving them a little break from afternoon shade is always good, but don't be afraid if all you have is full sun. They'll do just fine. Oh, the cluster you see there, by the way, pawpaw fruit is the largest native fruit in North America, um, which is pretty crazy. You know, the apples, the pears, the peaches, all are not native to North America. This is our largest native fruit. That's what the flowers look like in the spring. They're kind of interesting. The foliage here just starts to emerge as the flowers are coming out in April, and they're pollinated by flies, which is interesting, rather than bees or butterflies. And then in the fall, the tropical looking leaves have a nice fall color. This is the tree in my yard when it was younger, showing good fall color. You can see some trees in the background, kind of shading it from that a little bit from that hot southern sun exposure. Gorgeous 1 foot long tropical looking leaves. I think that's one of the reasons I love pawpaws, fruit or not, I don't care. They got great leaves. And you can see a sucker sprout coming up at the base right there. Some people might say, well, what do I do? Do I try to transplant that? Do I cut it? No, I'm going to let it become another stem and I'm going to have a pawpaw grove. That's what I'm after. They're high in vitamin C, magnesium, iron, copper. Again, it's another native fruit that's loaded with goodies. You can see them all there. I won't read them off. And that's my hand there. There are grafted pawpaws out there, and these grafted pawpaws were selected for larger fruit, fewer seeds. You can order them from places like Stark Brothers. They're expensive. You're going to pay for it, but there's nothing wrong with just growing a pawpaw seedling. Planting more than one is recommended. You will get some fruit on a single pawpaw, but it's very sparse. You want to plant more than one. The good news is you can plant those. Heck, you could plant those 6 feet apart. You could plant them 10 feet apart, 12 feet apart, and let those two stems grow up together and become one unit. They protect themselves better from storm damage because with those large tropical leaves, the wind can't hit them if they're not protected. And anyway, when you cut open that fruit, inside is this pulp, and it's all chunked up there in a bowl that I did, and there's seeds in there and everything. And I just freeze them, seeds and all, and say I'll deal with removing the seeds later. And you do want to remove the seeds, of course. It's smooth, it's custardy, often compared to banana, but it doesn't taste anything like a banana. It tastes like a pawpaw. It has its own unique flavor. Loaded with vitamins. Some people, though, I can tell you, don't like pawpaws. It's not for everyone. So, and not all pawpaws are created equal. Some taste better than others, and that's what they're selected for as well. But when you do have that pulp and you break it out of the freezer and you want to use it in a recipe, man, I think where we have potential commercially is with smoothies, because then you could just buy frozen pawpaw pulp and use it in recipes, right? Buy it in the store because they're very perishable. They bruise really easily. So this is something you're never going to see in stores unless it's made into and processed into the pulp first. I make a recipe every year and bring it to potlucks called pawpaw panna cotta. It's very easy to make. It's basically like pawpaw pudding. What can go wrong with heavy cream in a recipe, right? It's good stuff. But smoothies, the nutrition that you saw that a pawpaw offers, you can bring that to a smoothie, and it's really tasty. Uh, a lot of folks will agree that one of the best uses of pawpaw pulp is just like you would use bananas, overripe bananas in banana bread. Pawpaw bread recipes online, lots of them. It's delicious and it is nutritious. And then, of course, something like pawpaw ice cream. Lots of different recipes online, folks. So highly recommend including pawpaws in your landscape. If I had my way, we'd have hundreds of them in Lincoln. We'd have them in our park systems as thickets, and people could go into the park and harvest pawpaws. How cool would that be? Oh, and let's plant persimmons in our parks too, in our home landscapes, and then we're all sharing in the bounty. Persimmons aren't quite native to Nebraska, but the wild persimmons are native to places like Missouri, the Ozarks. I don't think they quite get into Kansas either, but pretty darn close in Missouri, like the Columbia, Missouri range. So they very close by, and they do well here in Nebraska. Easy to grow. The scientific name is Diospyros, the genus, which literally means fruit of the gods. It has so much sugar in it, it's the sweetest fruit next to the date palm. Indeed, if this fruit was never harvested and it just kind of dried on this tree, the fruit content, it would never turn rancid. It would never go rotten. You could eat it off the tree in the middle of February and it would just be like dried fruit leather because there's so much sugar in it. Kind of like honey, it never goes rancid, right? But one issue with persimmons is the first time you try one, if it's not fully ripe, you'll go, what's the big deal? These things are nasty. They have some serious pucker power if they're not ready. And what I mean by that is it gives you the dry pasties when you bite into it if it's not quite ready. Very tannin-based, astringent fruit. Indeed, you want it to let that fruit get a few hard freezes on it. And the fruit I'm holding in my hand there, if I push them with my finger, I mean, they're as soft as a pillow, very mushy and soft. And that's another reason you'll never see wild persimmons showing up in your grocery store, because they would just turn to a ball of mush in the groceries aisle. The ones you do see show up in the grocery store are Asian persimmons, which are harvested when they're not fully ripe, much like a banana, and then forced to ripen. So they don't have that same sugar content as they would being a vine ripened fruit. So though after it gets a few hard frosts, I'm telling you, I've been harvesting persimmons. I remember one day it was 8 degrees out. I'm up on the ladder harvesting persimmons, and I couldn't wear gloves because they're so mushy. My fingers were really cold, but the persimmons weren't even frozen. At 8 degrees, I couldn't believe it. And they looked like this. They were perfect. So they can really take it cold. Meter up here is a very cold hardy variety, the best one for Nebraska. If you do decide to order a grafted persimmon, because not all persimmons are created equal. There's companies out there, nurseries that sell grafted varieties, and there's probably a dozen different ones out there, folks. And meter is one that is self-fertile, meaning it'll pollinate itself. Because persimmons are male and female tree, you need more than one to get fruit. Which often deters people from planting it. But meter is a variety you can order or find that will be self-fertile for you. Sandra's asking, do these taste different from the California persimmons? So Sandra, the California persimmons that you're getting, those originated in Asia. It's the Asian persimmon. They can grow those in California. They're hardy there. Yes, similar, slightly different. I can't say for sure because I've never had a California persimmon that was plucked right off the tree that's pillow soft, that's vine ripened. I imagine there's subtle differences, but yeah, very similar. And then when you break that fruit open, that's what it looks like inside. And so you can see a wild persimmon, there's a lot of seed compared to pulp there, right? Like 50%. And that's why varieties like meter were selected, is they were selected for larger fruit and fewer seeds. If you go with the wild, that's fine. Again, it just has a lot of seeds. And then there's some bunch of fruit I collected. I just try to peel off that blackened outer peeling right there. And underneath is the soft, mushy stuff. And then I just drop it in this colander and sift it through. And then I collect all that pulp in a bowl, put it in a Ziploc bag, flatten it out and freeze it. And then I'm ready to use it whenever I want to make a recipe with it. And then you see all this stuff left behind after you sift out all the yummy pulp. There's the seeds and fiber left behind, but still lots of sweet, good stuff in there. So you don't let that go to waste. You actually can take that and put it on the stove and put it on low water to take out the rest of that pulp away from the seeds, and then use that material. And then the seeds can also be used, and we'll get to that. Anyway, the classic down south, what they make every time around Thanksgiving, and I do it as well. I'm no Southerner, but I love the tradition. Harvest the persimmons around Thanksgiving, between Thanksgiving and Halloween, after they've had some freezes on them. Collect that pulp and look up wild persimmon bread pudding recipes. It's very easy to make. It's just like making any other bread pudding. You can put them in cookies and smoothies, ice cream, flan. There's lots of different recipes out there using persimmon pulp. I don't know if you can buy persimmon pulp online. It would be worth looking into. I would hope somebody down south has decided to make a buck off that. You can actually order persimmon pulp online. Who knows? That somebody look into that right now as I'm chatting and let us know in the chat. Same thing with pawpaw pulp. For all I know, it's available. And I remember talking to a friend that really loves persimmons, and he likes to coat his pork butt in persimmon pulp and then bakes it. And he said it makes the best pork butt you would ever have in your life. So you can make a wild persimmon barbecue sauce for that. There's recipes online for that. Good stuff, Maynard. And it doesn't have to be for, obviously, meat. It can also be used for vegetarian items as well. Like greens, for example. Kind of a sweet, spicy, acidic taste because there's some vinegar in here as well. And then wild persimmon bread is another thing I love to make. I'm telling you people, it's 5-star. It is so good. Not available in restaurants, not available in stores. But man, if you have a persimmon, you could do this. It is heavy, it is dense. It's basically a quick bread as well, like banana bread, but so, so yummy. Cinnamon and spices like that. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the pulp there, as you're cooking it on the stove and saving that pulp water, the persimmon seeds are edible too, and they are used as a coffee filler or a coffee substitute. And get this, they were used by troops during the Civil War when coffee imports were blocked. I didn't even know coffee imports were blocked during the Civil War. And I read some dude wrote a letter back in 1863 talking about them being just as good as coffee. So on a recipe I found online, they said, well, it doesn't taste like coffee. It tasted more like chicory root tea. So if you like chicory root, kind of the Louisiana style coffee, you're going to like doing it with persimmon seeds. And after you roast them, it looks like they've been painted with gold paint. They're golden in color. So here's a raw persimmon seed in my hand there, and there it is after they're roasted. And then you grind them and save that powder. And grinding them, you're going to want to use a Vitamix. They will make a coffee grinder or a spice grinder run and hide from you because those seeds are like rocks, really hard after they dry and are roasted. But yeah, you can use the whole darn thing. Isn't that cool? Okay, seeing no questions about the persimmons and pawpaws. So now we'll move on to, there's one in the chat now. Let's see what's going on there. The American Persimmon Company of Indiana sells frozen American persimmon pulp. Good for you, Barb. Thanks for looking that up. Now, Barb, I got to ask, what are they going to stick it to us for price? It might be pricey. That's why I say, man, that's why this planting them at home or planting them in parks or just getting them out there, the more the merrier. Anyway, okay. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. So now let's talk about fruiting shrubs. This picture is, yes, blueberries. And yes, we can grow blueberries in Nebraska, certainly eastern Nebraska, but you are going to have to amend the soil, make the soil as acidic as possible. I would just recommend looking up tips and tricks for growing blueberries in the Great Plains because there's lots of good information out there, YouTube videos, all sorts of stuff. I'll give you confidence in blueberries. I know a fella here in Lincoln that has a patch of blueberries. He has them covered so the birds don't get them. Get this, he harvested, what was it, 40 pounds of blueberries off of his bushes, 40 pounds, and put them in the freezer. Is that not a trip? So there's some confidence builder for you. Persimmons, or I'm sorry, blueberries. Yes, we can grow them in Nebraska, right? Okay. Okay, so fruiting shrubs. So earlier I talked about a service berry, the shadblow. And the reason I put it up there is because those were fruiting trees. Now we're into fruiting shrubs. And there's a service berry that is a shrub form, only gets to be around 6 feet tall. There's a selection out there called Regent. And Regent was just a place name. There's a town in North Dakota called Regent, North Dakota. So that's where the seed was originally collected and grown. And what Regent is known for is good large fruit. It turns a nice kind of a dull yellow in the fall, not as pretty as a shadblow service berry with its pumpkin orange, but still nice. But man, the Regent is known for its fruiting. And what's nice about a Regent service berry is it's more at eye level, getting 6 feet tall, so much easier to harvest. I have gotten enough fruit, 8 cups off of 2 bushes planting side by side, enough to do 2 pies. So the Regent's a great one for your home landscape. Again, the more sun, the more fruit, but they also are very, very shade tolerant. I have some at home in full shade, and it took them, I mean, it took them, I'm telling you, people, it took them 10 years to finally fruit. This is the first year I actually got fruit off of them. Why did it take them so long? Because they're growing in full shade. They're not happy. I mean, they're tolerating it. But a Regent serviceberry grown in full sun, yes, indeed, you're going to get fruit probably in 5 years. Okay, let's see another chat. Misty asks, are any of these good on an incline? Yeah, that's tough, Misty. If it's an incline with full sun, that means the water's draining away and it's a pretty dry condition. I wouldn't hesitate to do it because both the persimmon and the pawpaw, serviceberry, they're drought tolerant. The serviceberry maybe be one I avoid. Just make sure if you're on an incline, mulch bed under those trees, as far out as you can go, make it so they're in a landscape bed with a wide mulch bed, not so deep, but wide to eliminate grass competition. So what rainfall does fall flowing downhill, you're actually capturing. Okay, now let's move on to one of my favorite fruiting shrubs, the black chokeberry. Chokeberries are popular landscape plants for good reasons. They're very attractive. They only get to be about 6 feet tall. There's shorter varieties out there now in the trade, folks. There's one called ground hugger. These aren't good fruiting ones. If you want good fruiting ones, you want a different one. And we'll get to that variety. They bloom early in the spring with pretty flowers, and the butterflies and the bees will hit those flowers for sure. And then later on in the fall, you can see the fall color on these. This is another one where my wife Pat and I like to wait until there's a few hard freezes on them because there's such a high tannin fruit. The freezes will kind of eliminate some of that astringent, pasty mouth. When you eat them fresh, they kind of give you the dry pasties as well. But after a few hard freezes, that really helps render or get rid of those tannins. And it's kind of gone commercial. Poland is the world's largest producer of chokeberry, even though chokeberry is a North American native plant, not quite native to Nebraska, more like the Great Lakes region, and points east towards Maine and whatnot. The In Poland they export around 90%, between 30 and 40 tons. And Harlan Hammernick at Bluebird Nursery really thought Nebraska could be a leader in aronia berry production, chokeberries, the same thing as aronia berry. And it's been a slow hoe as far as marketing that and getting it out in fields. There are some producers here in Nebraska, including a fellow in Arlington, and there's a product made that I don't think I got on this PowerPoint. But anyway, why the big deal with aronia? Well, they can be eaten raw off the bush, but more they're processed, and that juice is being used in a lot of different products now. Because again, they're harvesting 30 to 40 tons of the fruit. What are they doing with all that juice? I mean, it's used in a lot of different things now. A lot of the teas that we're getting, the juice drinks that we're getting, because it has such a pretty dark purple color, and everybody wants the aronia's antioxidant compounds. If you go to Juice Stop here in Lincoln, you see the aronia berry always featured there at the counter because they're so amazingly good for you. They are a superfruit. All right, Barb says, found another source, 16 ounces of the pulp for 13 bucks. All right, well, 16 ounces, yeah, a pound of it. Yeah, I would say that's enough to play with. It'd be worth it. And if you make something with it, that's boom. Kathleen says, my 3 plants are really bountiful and beautiful. Awesome, Kathleen. I'm assuming you're talking about the aronias. Yeah, that's great. And I'm hoping, Kathleen, you're harvesting the fruit. You might be saying, but I want to leave some for the birds. There's enough for both. Oh, hi, Sharon. Native 32 Winery by West Point makes all of their wine from aronia berry. Ah, and I will say the same thing, Sharon, that, my wife Pat and I, as you're well aware, make a lot of different wines. There she is, happy as a clam. I think we harvested 40 pounds that day, and we got it pretty quickly. For you winemakers, 20 pounds makes a 5-gallon carboy. So that's about 24 bottles of wine. And I asked her, so with all this wine, I'm after the superfruit compounds. Is the wine gonna kind of mess with that? Yes, the fermentation will render some of it, will kind of do away with some of the properties, but it will also enhance others, meaning it will make all those vitamins and minerals in there easier for our body to absorb. I'm not going to want you to drink a full bottle of wine, but a glass of aronia wine a day, my opinion, would keep the doctor away. Harlan always said, if you just keep them in the freezer and eat 8 of them a day, a handful, like 8 of them a day, right out of the freezer, again, you'll keep the doctor away. Okay. Now let's move on to another amazing superfruit, the chokecherry. And I say that with good intention. It is a superfruit. And the poor chokecherry is also a plant that's disappearing in Nebraska, people. It's up to us people, us gardeners, to plant it in the landscape and quit saying it gets too big, it suckers too much, it seeds around too much. Well, it's seeding around because the birds are eating all that fruit and then dropping it here and there. And if you learn what the chokecherry looks like, you can remove those seedlings and give them to a friend or plant them. When they're in full bloom, I think they're really gorgeous. And the bees love them, especially the small bees, and they bloom early. So, important pollinator source for our early emerging bees, that's for sure. Later on in the summer or in July, the fruit starts to ripen and it'll turn this gorgeous red color. And that's when the robins and other birds usually start hitting it. The robins love it, but they're not the only one. And it's a challenge because I want my fruit to get to this stage. Here's the red stage. I want them to get to this dark, almost purple stage, if you will, because that's when they've got the most sweetness to them, the most flavor compounds and all that. But if I have to get them red, it is what it is, right? Or, have enough planted so you do beat the birds. They're also packed with antioxidants and vitamins, but they also have the natural tannins, which gave them that bitter taste. They're not called chokecherry for nothing. They're no fun to eat raw, let's put it that way. But cooking them enhances their flavor and removes that dry pasties. It removes the tannins from them. Here's some chokecherries I harvested, and man, you can run down a rabbit hole with Native American traditional chokecherry recipes. There's lots of them. Thank goodness for the internet because it's just so great to be able to look up things rather than being all stressed out with politics and everything else right now, man. Fall down that rabbit hole of plants. You'll be glad you did. Anyway, it's been used in traditional medicine for centuries, not decades, centuries. Valuable for their high antioxidant content and potential healing properties. The Dakota, they've been used by a lot of different tribes, Shoshone, Dakota, the list goes on and on. The Pawnee, obviously, the Sioux, everybody and their puppy dog used them where they grew native. And they have a large native range in North America. The Dakota even named a month after them, which is a special thing for a plant. Every plant was special to Native Americans. But if you had a whole month named after you, that meant you were like the top notch, like you're the creme de la creme. Black cherry moon is July. So we call it July, they call it black cherry moon. I think that's pretty cool. Gathering and drying of fruit made for a busy time. They pounded the fruit pit and all and formed it into dry chokecherry patties. And these patties were used to make pemmican, which is also called wasna. And that's a shelf-stable food made with equal parts fruit, dried meat, and tallow, just like the Juneberry. So depending where you lived, what you had available to you, pemmican was used with a lot of different fruits, sometimes a mixture of fruits. And today we use them in jellies, sauces, wine, pie, syrup, right? And that's about all we know chokecherries for is making, I'm tired of making chokecherry jelly. Is there something else, right? Well, try making a syrup, which is just basically chokecherry jelly that didn't set, right? And you get yourself some ginger ale and drop a couple tablespoons of that chokecherry syrup in there, and now you got a chokecherry fizz. That chokecherry syrup will sink to the bottom, and now you have a two-toned glass of bubbly ginger ale. That's a recipe out of Kay Young's book called Wild Seasons that all of you should have. Let's see. I bought a plant last fall with pink berries. I wasn't sure if they were edible, but sure looked pretty. Where can I verify what I have? We also have a cherry tree at the house we bought but never ate them. They are smaller than store cherries. Yeah, I would say, Sandra, with iNaturalist out there now, that is a great thing that you can take a picture of your plant and there'll be experts on that site or on that app that will answer your question for you. You can certainly bring that image to extension because yeah, those pink berries, obviously that's not enough for me to answer. And And then Kurt says, our pests a concern, our cherry tree at the Benson Community Garden, we had a cherry tree and the worms were a nightmare. We do have a runny berry bush. It's amazing. No pests on that. Yeah, and I'm assuming with the choke cherry, yeah, it's in the prunus group, Kurt, but I've not seen the pest that the worms that are bothering you. Maybe talking about the tent caterpillars that can really hammer trees. It could be those, I'm not sure, but I have not seen that. They're so easy and so versatile. And if it does happen to eat them, those tent caterpillars aren't going to kill it. They're going to sure may take out some of the foliage and whatnot. But you can cut that branch away and new ones will sprout. I would not be concerned at all about pests for a native shrub like our chokecherry. Okay, so they pounded them into patties. How cool is that, right? And these patties, so people are still doing it today, folks, seeds and all. And basically a mortar and pestle, because again, if you try grinding these things up and say a Vitamix, it can be kind of difficult to pound into a patty. But there are uses for the Vitamix too, and we'll get to that. The patties are basically chokecherry candy with nuts from the crushed pits. The cherry pits are toxic when they're raw. So when you're grinding and crushing those, you don't want to eat it raw. But the process of boiling or drying will neutralize that hydrocyanic acid that's in there. Some people even say online they don't even worry about it. I don't eat large quantities, so I'm not worried about that acid. Well, to play it safe, see the drying process that Native Americans did, just drying them on the open sun on rocks and whatnot, screens, whatever you have, that drying process neutralizes that acid. How cool is that? And of course, boiling would do the same thing. So the mashed choke cherries add a lot of depth and flavor, given they have the flavorful pits included. In other words, you can dry those choke cherries and then grind them up in your Vitamix, or you can grind them up when they're fresh like this. Inside each choke cherry pit, there's a small nut. There's an image of the little nut that's inside that pit. That's the part that's rich in fats and nutrition. That's what the Native Americans were taking advantage of all those centuries. What's in the darn pit? Because when we're making chokecherry jelly and jam now, we're removing the pits, and that's where all the nutrition is. I read this article online, a traditional leader in, I think this was, I can't remember the Shoshone tribe, a traditional leader in the community who stressed that the reason for so many recent illnesses within the tribe was the lack of traditional foods being consumed, and specifically traditional chokecherry pudding. How interesting is that, right? In fact, this one student looked into it and actually got a biochemist involved at a university to look about the chokecherry pudding with seeds versus just the juice for its cancer fighting ability, and they saw some promising results. The traditional method includes the seed of the chokecherry crushed up. Excuse me. So there's an image of chokecherry pudding, which was obviously called something else by Native Americans. You can also juice the chokecherries. Oh, and by the way, there's lots. If you just Google traditional chokecherry pudding recipes, you'll fall down that rabbit hole that I did. Juice the chokecherries and make a natural probiotic fruit vinegar. Sure, you can just steep those cherries in vinegar that's already made, or you can make the berries into vinegar yourself. And it's just kind of like making wine. It's just you're adding to the fermentation process. So you would just juice the chokecherries, on low heat, sifting out the seeds in this case, and then adding a quarter cup of sweetener, whether it's sugar or honey, and let it start fermenting. Once the fermenting process is done, you strain it, or actually you leave it in there because it'll undergo a second fermentation. So this is the alcohol fermentation followed by the acetic acid fermentation. The fruit juice will naturally ferment into alcohol with the presence of surface yeast. So there's yeast naturally growing on those berries that will end up fermenting those berries once you add sugar to it. Once there, vinegar producing bacteria will naturally colonize and turn the alcohol into vinegar. And it is the bomb vinegar from what I've read online. I have not done this yet, but I highly recommend it from what I've read. You can make cherry pit brandy, go figure. So you take the dehydrated cherries, you grind them in a Vitamix, because again, it'll make a regular grinder run and hide. A Vitamix is like if you don't own one, man, invest in one. They're expensive, but they're worth it. And you put it into a blender and sift it, and then you sift it. And the sifted flour you can leave behind and use that in cakes. There's recipes online for that. And then you can take those leftover seeds and shells and put them in a freezer bag until you have enough. Once you have enough, you can fill up a jar about 2/3 full, and then fill that jar with brandy and let that steep in there for 30 days, and then strain it through a cheesecloth and sweeten it with a little maple syrup or honey. And you've got your own homemade chokecherry brandy. Sounds like a good thing to give to a friend or bring to a potluck, doesn't it? Oh, and there's an image of dried chokecherries in the background. So the point is, it was an important thing. If there's a bountiful harvest, harvest and harvest and harvest, because there's lots of ways to use them. You can make chokecherry infused bourbon. And there's also recipes online for sour cherry infused bourbon. And I make that every year. And it's just sour cherries layered with sugar. I use sugar cubes in between the layers, about a 2-inch layer of cherries. And the sugar pulls the juice out of the cherries. And after about 6 weeks, you can strain out that juice and save the cherries. We call them drunken cherries. And you can use those cherries in recipes too. But then that bourbon that's left behind doesn't taste like bourbon anymore. It tastes like the finest cherry brandy you'd ever have. It's so good. Intrigued? Look it up. It's good stuff. Okay. So much to learn about choke cherries, and I'm just really amazed by the pits, because I knew about that, pounding them in the pits and all, because choke cherries don't have a lot of pulp, they're all pit, very little pulp, but use that pit, take advantage of that nutrition that it offers us humans. It's there for our bounty. Okay, now I want to talk about another native shrub that's great for the landscape, the clove currant. Easy to grow in the landscape. These are small little flowers you're seeing here, maybe the size of my thumbnail, but they're so fragrant, and in abundance. You'll smell them before you see them. They bloom early in the spring and late April, early May. And in the fall, they can get a gorgeous red fall color. More often than not, I don't see this red fall color, but it seems to me the more stressed the plant is, the better the fall color is. And what I mean by that, the hotter, the sunnier, the drier, the better for this guy. It is native to the western half of the state. So it loves hot, dry, sunny conditions, and it's so tough. That's about a 6 foot wide and 5 foot tall plant. But if I wanted to, I could really prune it back by 50% to tidy it up if I so desire. But why do that? Let it take up that space. Another image of the flowers in the spring. The challenge is the fruit doesn't all ripen at once. So it's one of those demanding fruits you have to revisit about every 3 days to pluck off that ripened fruit. But it's worth it, because the fruit is so amazing, and you just don't find this stuff in stores either. Makes like the best pie in the world. It's also called buffalo currant. If you see that, if you try to order the plant or whatnot online, not readily available in nurseries. It should be, but anyway, it's worth growing and worth finding. Fantastic shrub, and you can use it again in all sorts of different recipes. The clove currant. The red lake currant is also very much worth looking for and finding. Easy plant to grow. It's native to the eastern part of the United States. Red lake is a variety was selected for its abundant fruit. And those red berries look like jewels hanging off that shrub. It's only about a 3 by 3 foot shrub, so it's small. It has gorgeous maple-like leaves, as you can see there, and just pretty fruit. The red fruited currants are typically used. That's the ones you buy at the store that are dried. You'll also see black currants dried, but the red ones are really known for that. They are also high in antioxidants and phenolic compounds as well. The good thing about the red ones too is they will grow well in part shade as well, although you'll get a better fruit harvest in full sun. Gorgeous looking berry that you can use in fresh in dishes or again drying them. They can be dried in the sun or they can be dried in the oven on a low setting or a food dehydrator. Lots of different recipes. Red currant scones. Oh, wouldn't that be the bomb? Like a red currant chutney, lemon bars. Then I saw this recipe online, red currant and elderflower ice cream. When we get to elderberries, I'll talk about the use of elderflower cordial and how wonderful that is. You wash the berries and you want to blanch them because the berries kind of have tough, hard skin. So if you blanch them in boiling water for 30 seconds, remove them out of the water and immediately put them in an ice bath to stop the cooking process. Then you can dry them and put them in on a screen or whatever and cover them with cheesecloth and then dry them outdoors. If you do it outdoors, it can take around 3 days to do it in the hot sun. But yeah, you just want to be cognizant that, cloudy days versus sunny days and whatnot. You can do it in the oven. Just be aware that, if your oven doesn't go below 170, you want it more like 150. And that leftover water that you do blanch them in becomes an excellent currant tea. So you're not wasting that water that you're blanching them with either. There's the flowers in the spring. They're small, but they're still noticeable and pretty and showy. There's also the American black currant, more native to areas like Wisconsin and Minnesota. And they do well here in Nebraska as well, and also very shade tolerant. Beautiful leaf on it. Very overlooked as a landscape plant, not common out there, folks. And that's the biggest frustration you're going to have is the things I'm talking about aren't very common. We, the consumer, create the demand. If we don't talk about them, they're never going to be offered, right? There's the fall color. The flowers, it's not a very good picture, kind of blurry, but you can kind of see the flowers dangling back there, and then a close-up of them in the spring, and the bees will hit them. Blackberry, got to talk about those quickly because they're an excellent landscape plant as well. There's some great thornless varieties out there. Those four, all of them are good and do well grown in Nebraska. They're erect plants, so they don't require a trellis to grow well, but you can use that trellis to kind of keep them confined and pruned back, easier to kind of tie them to that trellis so their long arms don't kind of go out into your garden path. But man, everybody should have a blackberry, right? Same with raspberries. There again, you don't have to have them on a trellis, but they're easier to manage. They're fall-bearing plants. They're often managed to produce only a larger fall crop on first-year canes. In other words, how do I maintain them? Because, there's old canes from last year that will produce, but yet new canes coming up, and it can be a real mess trying to deal with them in the spring. I know people, and I agree with this, they cut the whole patch to the ground every spring and then let them grow that whole season up into a trellis. So they're kind of kept confined like that. And then you'll get a bumper crop in the fall rather than periodic harvesting in the summer because they bloom and produce fruit on new wood. Okay, let's see. Yeah, let's see. We have a blue raspberry bush. Wow, lots of flavor, but not much fruit. Interesting. Yeah, I had not heard of a blue raspberry bush. There's the black raspberry that we'll talk about, but not the blue I had not heard of. I've heard a few folks talk about the weather changing and that plants from as far south as Dallas, Texas, doing well here now. Do you still suggest plants that are originally from Minnesota, etc.? Yes, Misty. With global warming, we're all concerned about what are our plants for the future? Are we going to have more recurring droughts? I'm going to say yes, certainly Minnesota plants, Wisconsin plants, northern plants. These plants have also dealt with nature having periodic drought and periodic flooding, hot temperatures. Yes, not as hot as Nebraska, mind you, but that same species is native to Nebraska or close to being native to Nebraska. So plants don't know borders. man drew those borders. But as far as southern species, you'd be surprised some of those southern species that are perfectly hardy in Nebraska, but the fruit crops out there, the native fruit crops, I'm going to pay more attention to close to Nebraska seed sources because those plants have adapted and to our day length and to our early or late springs, meaning with our changing climate, it might change 1 or 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, but that's an average, meaning all it takes is one night. If you have a plant from Texas and it's been growing for 12 years, and by golly, this is the year you're going to get a great harvest off of it. Oh, and we happen to get to 31 below that night. Whoops. Okay, gone is your plant, right? I see that. Understand. Thanks. Yeah, it's a law of averages. And that blue raspberry that you may have gotten, I don't know what that one is, but the wild black raspberry, this is a native plant to Nebraska. Not common, not commonly grown in the garden or not commonly available in the garden center like the red raspberry. It should be. I think one of the reasons is it's not common is it can be pretty aggressive. And the way to plant it is to give it its own space, give it like a 6 by 6 foot diameter area and let that plant rule that 6 foot space and surround it by mowed grass or a mowed area so it has nowhere to run. And then it's easier to keep confined. And the difference between a black raspberry and a blackberry, which this looks like, as you can see, the blackberry was taken off of this and there's a cone inside. So as the fruit is turned upside down, it's hollow inside, just like a raspberry. A blackberry doesn't have that same cone. Okay. Yeah, Sandra. And if it is the black raspberry, it might be too much shade. Shade might be a little bit of an issue. It could be an age factor. It's just not mature enough yet. The birds have spread it so much it's hard to control the plant. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. It's spreading. It can be a stinker that way. So if you have a bunch growing in shade, yeah, you're going to get some sparse fruit here and there. It fruits much better in full sun. Yeah, what are my thoughts about mulberries? We have many trees around here, but not sure if we should harvest. Oh my. Yes, you should harvest, but I can tell you, Kurt, sample because not all mulberries are created equal. Some taste more flavorful than others. And mulberries, even though I don't have it in the talk here, planting it as a landscape plant, yes, by all means. If you may say, well, how do I know it has been sprayed? It hasn't been sprayed. There'd be no reason to spray the mulberry. However, sure, there can be chemicals in the air, but if we all start to say, okay, herbicide drift and all this drift and stuff going on, yeah, I don't even want to know what's in the leaves and the stuff around all over. We probably don't want to know because we'd have to stop eating everything. Even your organic garden that is certified organic is going to be probably accepting chemicals from nearby fields with herbicide drift, right? Not saying everything's poisoned out there. Just saying don't concern yourself with how do I know it's safe to eat. Okay, they're the king of berries in terms of health benefits, the black raspberry. The ORAC level, which is a measure of antioxidant power, is about 3 times higher than that of blueberries. So it is a superfood all over again. And due to their astringent actions, leaves are used as a tonic for strengthening the uterus during the menstrual years, as well as during the last 6 to 8 weeks of pregnancy in preparation for childbirth, to prevent miscarriage, to relieve morning sickness, and reduce labor pains. Used during labor, raspberry leaf tea helps stimulate labor. How cool is that, right? So read up on that. There's folklore and herbalists that swear by the use of raspberry tea, and you can actually order raspberry tea online. How do you know it's black raspberry from the others? If you flip the leaf upside down, it's coated in white. That's one way you can tell you're looking at a black raspberry. If you're out in nature and you see a raspberry growing, there's a picture of the tea. There's kind of an image of what they look like. Again, they don't all ripen at once. The plant demands your attention and says, you need to visit me about every 3 days, harvest the fruit, and then I just drop them in a Ziploc bag and freeze it as I go until I'm done. All right, now I'm going to move on to another fantastic super fruit, another fantastic keystone piece species to wildlife. The others we are talking about are the same thing. Elderberries aren't planted enough. One of the reasons they're not planted enough is people are afraid at how big they get. You're looking at a 12 to 15 foot high shrub there, probably around 12 feet wide. So yeah, they get big. Give them some space. Who cares? Yeah, so gorgeous plant when it's blooming in the summer. And that's what I love about them is few other shrubs are blooming during the heat of summer like the elderberry. And those flower heads can be, gosh, a foot across, dozens of little individual florets that turn into these individual berries, making up that 1 foot cluster. So they're an excellent source of the anthocyanins as well, vitamins, calcium, iron. They contain sterols, tannins, essential oils. It is a superfruit. The fruit was cooked into a rich sauce or dried for winter use by Native Americans. And today we traditionally make them for wine, elderberry syrup, elderberry jelly. And if you know, elderberries are in the news quite a bit now to treat various illnesses such as stomach aches, sinus congestion, sore throat, the common cold. People use it as a flu prevention. You can kind of make your own elderberry syrup and then make your own elixir, with other good, warming, beautiful things like ginger and cinnamon, clove and honey. Lots of good stuff. You can order these products online. I know friends that make it and sell it on Facebook. How cool is that? You can do the same thing, or you can infuse it in bourbon. You can infuse it in vodka. You can infuse it in gin and make libations out of it, and still get that wonderful super fruit compound out of it. The entire flower cluster can be dipped into batter and fried. Uh, and while the petals can be eaten raw or made into a fragrant and tasty tea. Not saying I would eat the petals raw. Certainly, you could sample them. But I'm harvesting the whole heads, and then I'm drying them on newspapers. I may be removing the main part of the stem, but driving them stem and all right on the newspaper. And I found that those little flowers, they're not white anymore. They turn brown, but they fall right off those stems. So it's an easy thing to separate it from all those little tiny stems. Uh, they can be harvested and used to make elder tea or elderflower cordial. And if you look up the difference between elder and elderflower, I'm not going to bother talking about it, but you can certainly do that. With the way I look at it is an elderberry plant is so big. I mean, I'll back up. It's so big. I think there's enough to go around for you to harvest the flower clusters, for you to save some for berries for yourself, and to save some for the birds. There's enough for all three of us. That's why you should plant an elderberry. And if you've never made elderflower cordial, you're missing out. And yes, you can order the dried flowers online too. Um, all this stuff is out there. Jill asks, is erroneous self-pollinating? Yes, it is. Good question. Yes, it indeed is. Whoops, let me back up. Okay, folks, elderflower cordial. Um, no, Jill, we're not too far north to grow pawpaws. Pawpaws are native in areas like Wabunsee State Park and Indian Cave State Park. Um, I am from Dodge, Nebraska, 100 miles north of Lincoln. And my brother, we were eating pawpaws because he was told by people in Dodge, they won't grow here. He said, well, we'll see about that. So yes, I would say anywhere north of Omaha, you're risking it. Anywhere south of the Platte River and east of, let's say Minden. Yeah, I think you're going to be just fine growing pawpaws. Okay, so elderflower cordial, you guys, or you can make elderflower tea. This is elderflower tea, again, using dried flowers, not fresh. And then cordial, what this is you just make a simple syrup, and that's as simple as 4 cups of water to 4 cups of sugar. And then this recipe I found also added a half a cup of honey. And you heat that up on the stove to dissolve the sugar, maybe bring it to a simmer, a low boil for a couple minutes, shut off the heat, and then add the dried flowers to it and let it steep in there. And then once it cools, you add you don't take the flowers out yet, you just leave them in there. Once it cools, you add the juice of one lemon, one lime, and one orange. So that citrus concoction, but also the zest of that orange, the zest of that lemon, and the zest of that lime all get added to that jar. And you let them all steep together, put them in the fridge and let them steep together for 3 days. You can shake the jar if you remember, or just leave it alone. And then you strain out all that stuff, the flowers, the citrus zest and whatnot. And what you're left with is this beautiful golden colored, citrusy, sweet, florally noted stuff that you can use to make, mix it with ginger ale or club soda for the kids, or you can make a libation out of it. Or what we like to do with it is spoon a few tablespoons over a fruit salad and bring it to a potluck, and people will tell you that's the best fruit salad they've ever had in their life. And you'll kind of wink at them and say, I wonder why. It was the cordial. The cordial did it. All right. It's known to attract at least 33 different songbirds. So the birds know how nutritious it is. Probably the highest iron content of any native fruit. So it is a good plant for wildlife. And get this, when you see in the fruits starting to ripen and they're turning plump and they're still green, you can pick those and do the same thing, harvest them the same way. And often what people do is they use fork tines to get in those branches, because you want to separate those little berries from the branches. And fork tines will easily pull those berries off. And you can kind of rub them between your fingers too and pull them off. But remember, you don't want to eat the raw elderberries. They also have that acidic compound that can give you tummy problems. You want to cook them first. But if I'm going to use this recipe, I'm not cooking them. But by putting them in vinegar, by fermenting them, guess what? It renders that acid useless. So they're perfectly safe. So if you ever buy oh, now the name's escaping my brain. Homemade, what are those little flower buds, people? Help me out. Uh, and then you use them, they're salty, they're vinegary, and you use them in recipes. Somebody's hopefully telling me. Capers, that's it, Kathleen. Yes. So you can make your own homemade capers out of elderberry fruit. And there's the recipe online. You don't have to remember any of this. We'll have this available, or you can just type in. And the caper recipes you're going to find, folks, are from Europe, because Europe also has elderberries. It's the European elderberry is called black elderberry. It's a different species, but they've been doing it for centuries. Go figure. There's a picture of the flower and the lovely fruit. Okay, now we'll go to our native wild plum. Wild plums are another one that I'm worried about 20 years from now. I hate to say it's going to be an endangered species in Nebraska, but and who would have thunk it? There's wild plums everywhere, isn't there? Man, they keep getting removed from road ditches. They keep getting removed from nearby farm fields. And if that isn't getting them, herbicide drift is getting them. You're lucky to get a wild plum harvest 1 in 7 years. But if you go out to the areas like Valentine and out west where we don't have agronomic crops, they still get abundant harvests of wild plums. But they don't have planes up in the air spraying herbicides either while the wild plums are in bloom. The fruit was highly valued, fresh or cooked by Native Americans. It was made into a sauce. The plums were also dried for winter use, so it's another one. When they were ripe, they stuck around and harvested them all until they were all ready. And they also were used as plants were nature's calendar to Native Americans, and the Omaha planted their corn based on when the wild plums were in bloom. So pay attention when the wild plums are blooming next year. Chances are people will be out there planting corn at the same time. And it was such a special plant that August was named the Red Plum Moon by, I can't remember which tribe, but likely the Sioux or the Pawnee. And it boasts one of the highest food values, 20% carbohydrate content of any other fruit. So it's incredibly nutritious. Plucking, they also have a lot of tannins. So if you bite into an underripe wild plum, It'll give you the dry pasties as well. But the ripe fruits are like candy. And you know they're ripe because they separate easily from the twigs and they have a little give to them when you squeeze them. So I'll actually kind of touch them and squeeze them while they're still on the plant to see, are you ready yet? And if they're still as hard as a rock, I leave them until they have a little give. And then if they have a little give, I'll sample one or two to see if they taste like candy. And then lots of different recipes online for wild plums. I'm telling you what, from tarts, obviously wine is one. They make great jelly, a very pretty jelly. All right, quickly, I'll talk about some tea time. Lots of edible plants we can grow in the landscape. You could even just make yourself a tea garden. Now, it doesn't have to be just a tea garden. You can implement these anywhere in your landscape plants. But how fun would it be to just say, I'm going to dedicate an area of my garden to tea plants? And one of those tea plants could actually be one of our native wildflowers, the lead plant. Lead plant doesn't have a sexy name, I realize. You know, it was named because the leaves kind of have that color of heavy metal like lead. The flowers are fleeting, but they're gorgeous summer flower, often blooming in late June. And lead plant, it takes patience. A small little plant, you plant it one year, you're not going to be able to get a full-size plant till probably 3 or 4 years later because it's building itself an incredible root system. The prairie pioneers called it devil's shoestring because they could literally feel the roots snap under the weight of the plow. It had such an extensive root system, but it makes a fantastic tea. If I was to commercialize it, I would call it prairie tea because lead plant tea, I'm sorry, just ain't going to cut the mustard. But 1 tablespoon of dried leaves per cup of water, bring it to a boil, and then you don't actually shut off the heat. You allow it to simmer for at least another 4 minutes, kind of on a low boil, because it's such a mild flavored tea. You want to do that. And I'm telling you, the tea is as good as any dark tea out there. There's the leaflets. I'll harvest the leaflets and dry them on newspaper. And then there it is when I put them in the water, the leaflets float. And it's like, huh, how am I going to get them to steep if they just float? And this is hot water in here. You can see the hot pad when I put them in there. Well, the leaves are covered with these tiny little hairs that us humans can't see. That's what gives them the gray color. But once those leaves start to absorb the water, they sink. And now they're in that hot water bath, as you can see here. And then letting them steep in a low boil for 4 minutes. I strain out the leaves, and there you've got your wonderful tea. But those leaflets that I strained out, I'm saving them. It's the only tea I know of, and if there's another one, please let us know, that you can get 2 more brewings out of. So I strain them and I save those leaflets and I can brew them 2 more times. There's not another plant out there that can say that. And again, I can't say enough about the quality of the tea. Mountain mint, another fantastic landscape plant that we also have in our sunny gardens. Just like lead plant, it's a hot, full sun plant. An amazing mint-like scent. Now it's called mountain mint, but if you see the scientific name, it's Pycnanthemum. So it's not a mentha species. The menthas are the spearmints, the peppermints. It's called mountain mint. Well, it's native to mountainous areas in the Appalachians. That's where it gets its name, not the Rocky Mountains. But anyway, it has a delicious mint-like scent, and it can be used like we would use mint, but it's much more well-behaved than mint. It doesn't run like crazy. The clump will expand a little bit every year, but that's a good thing. You want more. And this is our go-to making a cold brew tea. In the summertime, I think I only have one picture of it. In the summertime, I will harvest those leaves before it flowers, a nice big handful, and I'll put it in a cold pitcher of water. And I'll just put that pitcher of water in the refrigerator and forget about it for 2 or 3 days. And then I'll drink that water. And I've had people ask, well, when do you strain the leaves out? And I'm like, I don't, because I drink the tea so fast. I just leave the leaves in there. Oh, what are you saying, Sharon? Let's see. Yaupon, ilex. Oh, is that an ilex? Can be brewed at least a second time. Okay, very good. We're going to try growing one this year. It's a southeastern shrub. Cool. Yaupon, Ilex vomitoria. Boy, there's a scientific name for you. Vomitoria. I think that plant has a story to tell, Sharon. We'll chat about that another day. Yeah, anyway, I can't say enough good things about mountain mint, people. I'm telling you, you want it for your garden. Same with this one, wild bergamot. Easy to grow, makes a fantastic tea. Wild bergamot, wild bergamot has a chemical in it called thymol, thymol, and thymol is the essential oil that is in thyme, the herb thyme. So this can be a substitute for oregano and thyme in savory dishes. The dried leaves can. Um, First of all, the flowers are gorgeous, right? And you can certainly harvest the flowers for tea, but you're harvesting the leaves for the tea. But the Native Americans, they would harvest the flower buds. You can see the bud right here, and then a flower just starting to open. So they would pluck the top 3 inches of this and dry that, and then make a tea out of it for cold and flu symptoms. Topically, it was also used for fungal infections. The tea is also used for digestive woes. I mean, it is just nature's medicine. And with all that essential oil, the thymol in it, thymol, folks are looking at for its cancer fighting abilities, folks. And again, the seed heads here, I think are cute. I think they're showy. I think they're interesting. And if you look here, each one of those is an individual little tube, and that tube has a seed in it. But each one of those individual tubes, you guys, represents an individual flower. That's why it's so great for pollinators, because this mop top cluster, each one of those little things you see coming out of here is an individual flower. And the center part of this hasn't even bloomed yet. How cool is that, right? We call that a composite flower. Another fantastic tea plant for the garden, everybody should have, is the anise hyssop. I just say anise hyssop because it's easier to say, right? Oh, I like that. Sharon makes a wonderful elixir. Steep it in rum or vodka for a month, and then add honey. Good stuff. I'm with you. There's so much to talk about, so little time. I just appreciate you guys joining me for this, and I appreciate your comments, Sharon. Keep them coming. Anise hyssop. So we could do a whole talk just on this herb. There's so much to be said for this super plant. It has so many different things. The leaves were used medicinally. I mean, there's just so much to talk about with anise hyssop. Its use as a balm or a lotion or a salve, but it just makes a fantastic tea. Here's some other plants you can grow in your garden that make great tea. Lemon balm, the common hyssop, lemongrass, lemon verbena, thyme, holy basil. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So go there, make that tea garden. Wild roses. Rose petals in a lot of cultures are used in recipes, especially Middle Eastern cuisine. And we can make our own rose waters too. Um, yeah, Sandra, wouldn't it be fun to be able to visit public spaces with these examples? So to me, Sandra, that's kind of like, okay, if you think about a public garden, an arboretum, what are they showcasing? Things we can grow there. I think the arboreta of the future, like the top-notch ones, whether it be Lauritsen Gardens or, Chicago Botanic Gardens, you name it, rather than having a rose garden, I think we need a wild edible garden in every darn one of these. So push them whenever you visit a botanical garden. Say, we need to learn this stuff. Missouri Botanical Gardens has their Kemper, a Kemper thing, and Powell Gardens is another one that would be a good place to start. Okay, rose petals. But if you're going to do rose petals, harvest them and use them, you want to get the wild rose because the typical garden roses don't have the same chutzpah as a wild rose would have to make a rose petal syrup or to make a rose petal water. Rose petal syrup, this is a quote from Kay Young's book. It's one of nature's most delectable treats. I like to say it's 5-star. Okay. You can order rose petal hips online. You can get them here locally at places like Red Clover. They have so many different health benefits to them too. They make a fantastic tea. And I say that because if you try to make rosehip tea yourself, they are a serious hassle to work with. So if they're pricey for a reason. They're a lot of work to harvest and to process, but worth it. Rosehip tree, there's the dried rose hips you can order online. Rose petal syrup, there's that delectable treat that Kay Young was talking about. That's a little easier to do, but you have to come across, if you know of a patch of wild roses in the landscape, because that's another one that over time, they used to be common in our road ditches, but we love to mow our road ditches more often than not now. It's kind of rare to see wild roses growing in road ditches anymore, which is sad to say. Okay, I'm glad I have enough time to talk about this one because I want to turn you on to this beautiful plant that we all know and love, but hopefully this will teach you a little bit more about this plant. Sumac, the road ditch sumac that we all see and know about. The cones, notice this cone growing here. When it's ripe, the leaves are still green. That's when I'm out harvesting my sumac, because if you wait until the sumac turns red in the fall, a lot of that acid that's in that fruit will be washed off with rains, and just the sun, the oxidation will remove some of that beautiful juice. If you harvest them at the right time, I can run my hand up that cluster of fruit, and my hand is literally wet from the juice. And I tasted a little bit of the juice, and it tasted like lemons on steroids. It's unreal. It's, get this, you guys, it's in the citrus family. And the first thing you're probably thinking, but yeah, but I thought sumac was poisonous. That's because whenever somebody talks about sumac, they also mention the poison sumac. And if you live in Louisiana, you would have to be worried about telling the two apart, because even with global warming, poison sumac is not hardy here. And poison sumac, I'm sorry, doesn't look, in my opinion, anything like the common sumac. Certainly the fruit doesn't look anything like the common sumac, and that's what you'd be harvesting anyway. So no worries, it's not poisonous, okay? Now, I'm not going to tell you to eat the leaves, even though the leaves were dried and traditionally used as in smoking in pipes. It was a very common thing that was used. Haven't done that yet. Maybe it's on the bucket list. But sumacade, or Indian lemonade, as it's all nutritious and refreshing summer. I like to envision that Native Americans had a party when sumac was ready to harvest, when it was sumac season, they would have a party with all this sumacade. And I'm telling you, it's good stuff, people. You basically place the berries in a jar pitcher, the whole cluster. You know, you don't have to pick the berries off, just put the whole cluster in there and cover it with water. Usually what we do when we put the berries, before we put them in the pitcher, I'll put them in a bucket or something and kind of smash them a little bit to kind of get those juices flowing, and then put them in the water. Don't use hot water; it will leach the tannic acid from the stems and seeds and make it bitter. It's a cold brew tea basically. And then I'll let it steep for more than a night, depending how strong you like it. But letting it cover and steep overnight in a cool place, it doesn't have to be refrigerated. But I put mine in the fridge right away and let it steep for 3 days. Anyway, once you strain out all the pulp and the seeds and whatnot, you're left with this pretty refreshing looking drink. It can also be dried. So you can dry the berries and process them into a flavorful spice that you maybe have heard of called za'atar. And za'atar is an Indian spice. Well, how could that be that there's an Indian spice and sumac is native to North America? Well, there's a sumac native to China and India called the Chinese sumac. That's where za'atar comes from. But we can use our native sumac for the same recipe. And if you look up za'atar recipes, it's a blend of different spices, much like a curry is. But I highly recommend you look it up and do that. The bright lemony flavor of sumac is a perfect match for the earthy flavor of dried thyme, sea salt, toasted sesame seeds. So those are some of the typical herbs and spices that are added to make za'atar. So you can make a refreshing drink out of it, and you can dry it to make something else out of it. And my wife, Pat, and I we make a lot of different wines. We call our little operation anything but grapes because we make wine out of pretty much anything but grapes. Anyway, Sumac makes a dynamite wine. I want to talk to a winemaker. Whoops, I want to back up here. A winemaker and see if we can get a winemaker out there to blend sumac for a wine, much like they're doing with the aronia berries. Oh, so much to do, so little time, people. Okay, I got 5 minutes left. I'm going to check on the chat here. It looks like we're caught up there. So Morgan, you can chime if you want, but I'll keep going if you want. I have just a few more trees. The cedar. Oh my gosh, people, there's so much to talk about, right? I got a few more plants to talk about though.
I think we're good to keep going, Bob.
Keep going
Because
right
we've
up until
already,
8.
yep, and we've
Because I
already
saw
launched
you.
the poll.
Yeah, I saw you got the survey out already, so that's good to go. And if any more comments or whatnot show up in the chat, I'll be sure to address them. Yeah,
Awesome.
and then the lowly eastern red cedar, people, you can make a tea from the berries that has been known for centuries for the treatment of coughs and colds. So you know about elderberry syrup. What I'm trying to tell you is you can have a concoction of things. You can have your own herbal medicine chest. So when that cold or that flu comes on, you don't have to call that herbalist friend anymore. You've got your bee balm, your Monarda, you've got your anise hyssop, you've got your eastern red cedar, you've got your aronia. Yes, it may not say I drink my cedar tea and my cold's gone, but what they typically do is they will lessen the duration and they will lessen how bad your cold is. So it's just a good thing. Even if it doesn't get rid of your cold, they're still high in antioxidants, vitamins A and C. It also has a cancer-fighting compound called podophylotoxin. So the plant is a nature powerhouse. Oh, cool. Brian says the berries can also be used as a natural yeast carrier for sourdough. Ooh, I love that idea. Yeah, because a lot of these berries, folks, have native yeast on them, have natural yeast on them. And of course, people will dry the berries and use them for savory dishes too, like flavoring game and whatnot. Yeah, it's also a traditional ingredient in making German sauerkraut, and they pickle well on their own. So have pickled juniper berries. How fun is that? Or a wintertime cauliflower soup with wild ginger. Lots of different recipes online, people. So you can use them fresh or dry them. You can leave them whole until ready to use, crushing them with a mortar and pestle. And there you can use the dry berries to directly season meats or a flavoring for sauces and marinades. Its flavor is piney with notes of black pepper. Our lowly Eastern red cedar. Um, yeah, people apply Eastern red cedar to the skin for wounds, skin rashes, hair loss, eczema, acne, warts, and rub into joints for rheumatism. So I'm interested, Brian. I know you're the bearded one. You can actually order juniper spice beard balm. What I'm challenging you people out there is to make your own homemade beard balm and give it to somebody that you know that's bearded for Christmas. You'd be a cool person. And that beard balm, apparently there's something in Eastern red cedar that's really good. Leslie asked, isn't Eastern red cedar invasive in some areas? Well, yes, it is, but that means if you harvest the berries, Leslie, its we're going to reduce its invasiveness because the birds, it's if you ask people what's the best shrub or tree for songbirds, for wildlife, the top one that invites the most songbirds to eat its fruit is Eastern red cedar. I mean, it's like the numbers are phenomenal, like 70 different songbirds. So those songbirds are eating the seeds and then depositing the seeds here, there, and everywhere. So if you and I are harvesting the seeds, well, the birds can't get them all, right? It is a wonderful plant, people, I'm telling you. Whoops. All right, pine and spruce tips, and we'll leave it there. Uh, what we mean by harvesting those is the new growth in the spring. We call them pine and spruce tip candles. Those candles that are kind of coming out of last year's growth, these little two-toned colors. So there's last year's growth, and then that bright green is the tips. And that's what you would harvest and dry. Certainly you can use them fresh, But if you read up on them, pine and spruce tips are another go-to for cold and flu season. High in vitamin C. You can make a nutritious syrup or tea with them. So you make the tea first, and then you can make it sweet with a simple syrup. Awesome, awesome. Great for cold and flu season. So they're often used as a remedy for respiratory ailments. That's what people, bronchitis, things like that. And get this, they also contain large amounts of shuquamic acid, the compound used to make the flu-fighting ingredient in Tamiflu. So if Tamiflu is good for you, by golly, so is spruce and pine tip tea. Not bad. Or we'll leave you with this, Mugolio, pine cone syrup. This syrup has been made for centuries in places like Italy with the Mugo pine, hence the name Mugolio. The syrup has the essence of pine, but with none of the strong tannins you would expect, just pure piney goodness. It does not taste like a pine tree. Let's put it that way. I've made it before. You basically use the unripe cones, the green cones when they're only about an inch to an inch and a half big, and all of them are edible. You can use spruce, you can use fir, you can use pine. Forager Chef has some great recipes. Basically, you mix, I think, 2 to 1, 2 parts organic sugar with 1 part pine cones. You look at them the next day, and the sugar is pulling the juice out of these cones. You don't add any water to it, yet it turns into this slurry. And once the water releases the mixture, it will ferment. So you see bubbling taking place, lowering the pH and adding funky notes. And you let that steep for a good month, and then you strain out the pine cones. Of course, you can aging it longer is fun too. The pine cone syrup, you can actually order this stuff online. It'll run you $25 for a half a cup. So you can make this stuff by the quart full and give it to your friends. And I'm telling you, they're going to go, dude, where's this stuff been all my life? What can you use it on? Well, you can use it on pancakes, you can use it on waffles, or you can use it on a savory thing. I did it drizzled over mascarpone and served with crackers. Oh my word. Big thing, Mugolio. All right, people, we are out of time. Um, I think we will end it there with Mugolio. And yeah, I don't know why my camera is no longer on. Well, you don't need to see my ugly face anyway, but for some reason my camera's not working anymore. I was having issues with that earlier today. So Morgan, are we good?
Yep, we are. And actually, Bob, we did post this till 8:30. My apologies. I
Oh,
think when we spoke, we said 8, but if you do
oh,
have
wait.
some things
Well, actually,
to
no,
chat
no,
about,
no.
we can stay on if you would like.
I'm good. We can keep going. Hopefully nobody shut down and said, "Oh, he's out of here." No, no, I can keep
Yeah.
going. I'm sorry. 8:30 is fine. You know me,
Okay.
Morgan. I need 2 hours, right?
Yeah. Well, if you're
You know
I
me.
can certainly stay on with you till 8:30 if that's okay with you, and we can touch base on a few more things for sure.
No worries. We have nothing going on at home this evening, so we're good.
Okay.
I'll keep rolling along.
Awesome.
All right, because yeah, there's lots of good plants to talk about yet. Okay, your edible landscape can include American linden. And if you don't have the American linden and you have the European linden, well, more power to you. The problem with lindens that I see is people often limb them up too high. They limb them up high enough so a semi truck could drive underneath them. So if you leave your branches down low so they sweep the ground and bring your mulch bed out to the drip line, not quit trying to go grass underneath it, much easier to harvest. And Sharon, I know you're listening and I know you have branches that sweep to the ground because it's so frustrating trying to harvest linden flowers and they're all, higher than a stepladder able to reach. But before we get to the linden flowers, I want to tell you about this little nugget. The favorite part of the linden tree might actually be the leaves. So in the spring, the little linden leaf buds are before the leaves even unfold. You can pluck those off the tips of the branches and pop them in your mouth and eat them whole like that. They're sweet, and all that concentrated leaf matter rolled tightly into a bud has a pleasant green crunch. So you can add that to a salad. Certainly, you could saute them a little bit for a short period of time and dress them up with a little olive oil and and lemon juice, whatever turns you on, or snack them on your linden tree and get your neighbors to stare at you. Go, what the heck are they eating now? And then add to your weirdness. Linden leaves are always edible, meaning you could pluck them in the middle of summer and eat one, but you're going to say, not very exciting, kind of bitter actually. We want to actually harvest the leaves when they're emerging in the spring. And when they're emerging before a leaf gets fully mature, you can actually put your finger behind it and the leaf is translucent. That's the best time to harvest it. You can cut them up and use them fresh in a salad. I just wouldn't have a straight up linden leaf salad. I would blend it with other leaves and or you can blanch it again, or I mean saute it much like you would spinach, not very long so it doesn't turn to mush, but just a short saute, drizzled with a little lemon juice, salt, and pepper at the end. So linden flowers, man, if you look up, you'll fall into a rabbit hole with lindens too. Just look up health benefits of lindens. Look for articles. There's so much written about this wonderful plant. Worldwide, it is known as the world's leading anti-cold and anti-flu herb. I'm glad when COVID was around, if you recall, every time the nightly news was on, at the end of the nightly news, they would say, and now for your herb of the week. Here's a tea you could be drinking every day to help reduce your cold and flu symptoms and build your immune system. Do you remember that? Actually, it never took place, but it sure would have been nice if it would have. Or just talking about cold and flu prevention. Because again, these things aren't going to knock them out all at once. You're not just going to drink the tea and it's gone. But if we start to include these things in our diet, we're not going to be so sickly. At least I hope. Look at all the things they contain. The abundant amounts of protein. Go figure. High levels of trace minerals, flavonoids, tannins, volatile oils. It's the nectar of kings. You can dry them and make a tea out of them, or you can tincture the flowers. And you can actually buy linden flowers online, so you don't have to go through all the trouble. But I highly recommend you get used to doing. Just know that linden flowers are rather fleeting, so when they're in bloom, don't mess around. You get out there and harvest them. And if it takes more than one day, like literally that cluster will only last around 3 days. Medicinally, they're one of the most commonly used as a sedative in the treatment of anxiety. They're also used in the treatment of colds and flu. The best time to gather is right after they open. The flowers quickly fade, like I said, and they'll only have peak fragrance for only a few days. And if you have any tips to offer the linden, Sharon, because I know you've harvested many more flowers than I ever have, but do chime in if I'm leaving anything out to make life easier with the linden, or just tell people about its attributes. It's the cat's meow. Let's put it that way. It's got so many different health benefits, not only internally, but topically as well. And you may say, can I overdose on linden tea? Can you overdose on chamomile tea? Can you overdose on green tea for their health benefits? That's the way I put these herbal medicinal plants. Elderflower liqueur. How did I get that mixed up? I was supposed to throw that in another area. We already talked about elderflowers. Well, you can make a liqueur out of them too. Okay, that's the last I got to say about the elderflowers, unless there's leaving linden tea overnight makes it a little thick and is great for an irritated tummy. So the flowers, that means, have mucilaginous properties in them, folks, which helps coat and soothe and relieve. And that's why that tea is so good for you too, because those mucilaginous properties will transfer to your lungs for your respiratory issues. So sound like a good stuff to clean out your body? Yes, yes, it does. All right, now let's talk about nuts. Let's go get some nuts. And these you may not have in your yard yet. You may have access to them, but nonetheless, you're going to learn about them. American hazelnut's a fantastic landscape plant, fantastic shrub. It does get big. A full-grown American hazelnut, will be around, I would say 12 to 15 feet high and about 8 to 12 feet wide. It's a suckering shrub, a thicket shrub. And what's great about chokecherry, elderberry, wild plum, American hazelnut, Songbirds need our help, folks, and they will eat all of these, including hazelnuts, but they will also nest in these thicket shrubs. They're the most important nesting habitat we can provide for songbirds. Not 60-foot oak trees, but 15-foot suckering shrubs. Those are the best for our nesting songbirds. Great fall color. One of the first things to color up in the fall, the American hazel. They got cool catkins. Their flowers are called catkins. And this is what they look like in the wintertime in the upper left. And then as spring approaches, they're one of the first things to flower. These catkins will elongate down to about 4 or 5 inches long. The picture here is about 2 inches, and then they elongate about 4 to 5. I think they look like tinsel dangling from the bare branches. So the leaves haven't even thought about coming out yet. Often they are flowering in late February and early March. That's where we're at about right now. Well, with 18 degrees below zero, they will adjust and bloom sometime in March. They're not out there being a fool blooming right now. They will adjust to the cold weather. And then the fruit forms in these husks in clusters, and then these involucres, they're called, or husks, form around the developing seed, and then the husk will open as they're ripening, and then the seed will drop right out. And there's the hazelnut. And there's actually hybrid hazelnuts out there that are hybrids with our American hazelnut and the European hazelnut. Why bother to hybridize them? Because the nut is like 2 or 3 times the size of the American hazelnut, and it has all the hardiness and disease resistance of our American hazelnut. 2 of them out there are that are available now. One will be in the future, Grand Traverse and the Beast. You can get from places like Great Plains Nursery here in Nebraska. Raritan is another one coming out, and you want to plant Grand Traverse and the Beast together because they pollinate each other and give you a heck of a fruit crop. They need space though. I mean, we're talking, 15, 18 foot, so they're big boys. Okay, black walnuts. Yes, you could grow them in the landscape. Maybe you know where some are growing nearby, and maybe if you have it in your landscape, you put it down because they're messy trees and they have jugloan, and most of the jugloan, the vast majority is concentrated in these husks. And jugloan is an allelopathic chemical that keeps other plants from growing nearby. Keeps them stunted, but native plants have learned to adapt with the jugloan. You can grow a lot of different things underneath the walnut, from hostas to ground covers. Things in the nightshade family don't like jugloan, and that is things like tomatoes, peppers, and eggplant, which last time I checked, we're not planting under walnuts because of the shade. But anyway, there's the developing fruit. Walnuts and butternuts are important trees for local wildlife. Butternuts are more native to the eastern United States. Their foliage hosts a myriad of Lepidoptera, which are the moths and butterflies. And the large nuts help sustain squirrels and other rodents. In fact, the one of the moths that prefers the black walnut is the Cecropia moth, which is that big, beautiful moth that everybody loves. Yeah, we talked about the jugloan already. Most natives that evolved within the range of walnuts are unfazed by jugloan. So people don't plant walnuts because they think it's going to kill everything around them. That's why I put that in there. Most native plants, the hazelnut, the chokecherry, the wild plum, all the things we've been talking about are unfazed by jugloan. Hey, there's our state champion. The largest black walnut we know of in the state is at Arbor Lodge, just north of the lodge itself. I recommend you visit that tree and give it a big hug. If you have a friend, it takes 2 of you to hug that big boy. And this picture doesn't really do it justice, but there's a black walnut tree in Omaha. Gorgeous landscape tree, in my opinion. But look underneath that tree. It's not turf grass. It's all landscape plants, shrubs, hostas, things like that. Look at how the jugloan's killing them. Not. So jugloan is so overrated. Makes me mad. Okay. Let's see. Which websites and Facebook pages should we be following to learn more? Yeah, Kurt, that's a good question. The thing I found, Kurt, with edible plants and wild edible plants and plants you just even know about, if you just look up health benefits of, you'll go, huh, and maybe there are no health benefits of it. but that's what I'm talking about, falling down that rabbit hole. Look up, are hostas edible? Oh, yes, they are. Right? And just that inquiring mind wants to know. But there's some great, and Sharon, I would invite you while I'm chatting, if you'd be willing to answer Kurt's question. And one of the groups I like, the Facebook page is Forager Chef. Man, if you follow that guy, there's some great websites out there, that being one of them. Yeah, Sharon echoes that. And oh gosh, Sam Thayer, his books, and those are more on wild edible plants. But the medicinal part is what I'm going to let Sharon comment on her Bibles or her go-tos. But wild edible plants, look for Sam Thayer and others. Thayer is Thayer. But black walnuts are high in protein, healthy fats, and many vitamins and minerals. Black walnuts are 75% higher in protein than the store-bought English walnuts. 75%, people, which provide 4 grams of protein per gram of ounce of serving. Walnuts are a good source of antioxidants and provide the good type of omega-3 fatty acids. So sounds like nature's powerhouse to me. So the much maligned black walnut, we need to get back to including in our diets. And I met plenty of people that say, I don't do black walnut, I don't like them, and I just feel sorry for you. You can buy black walnuts online. We used to have a company called Heartland Nuts and More. Unfortunately, we don't have them anymore, but you can still buy black walnuts. You'll pay a pretty penny for them, but I think they're worth it. And get this, you can actually buy black walnut oil, black walnut syrup online. Yes, they tap black walnut trees for black walnut syrup. I have not had the pleasure of having it, but I hear it rivals maple syrup. So let's get passionate for sharing and resurrecting the age-old process of pressing forest oil crops. So in other words, the black walnut nut may not be big enough for you to get a lot of nut meat out of it, but what if we had the facility here to press the walnuts and make oil out of it? Then we could have black walnuts as an alternative crop. The heck with all this corn and soybeans, right? Okay, very good. Thanks, Sharon, for doing that. Okay, roasted black walnut infused bourbon. Okay, this is what I do at home. So I roast the black walnuts and then I fill a jar 2/3 with that roasted black walnut and then top it off with bourbon and let it steep for 30 days and then drain out the bourbon and then I let those walnuts dry again. And then I coat them with egg whites, frothy egg whites, and then dust that with sugar and cinnamon, and then make candied black bourbon black walnuts in the oven. And my, oh my, you bring that to a potluck and people thought just not available in stores. And here you got this lowly plant out there just saying, hello, wake up and love me. Okay, or you could do this fun thing, homemade nocino. And that's just another thing, much like the Mogolio came from Italy, nocino comes from Italy as well, except they made nocino. It has been made for centuries, you guys. You can find it online and order a bottle. It was a traditional drink after dinner to help calm your upset stomach, or not upset stomach, but help in digestion. Basically, it's a black walnut liqueur. Basically, you remember that first picture I showed you where the green walnuts, the walnuts were still green? So you harvest them in the summertime, early summer, like in June, when those little walnuts are only an inch. And those little walnuts then can be cut easily with a chef's knife. You basically quarter them and then you steep them. 30 days, then you strain that mixture and thin it and sweeten it a bit, like with some maple syrup, and then it rests for a good 6 months. Now, that 6 months, we've been letting our rest for our year and a half now. And one of the reasons, if you look up nocino and order it, you'll say, holy moly, not for that price. Because we're talking this bottle would be something like, oh, 40, 50 bucks. And why? Because it takes so long. It's easy to make, but you got to let it steep for a year or two. Just put it down in your preservation room, label it, and forget about it for a couple of years. Just kind of like we did. I forgot about it and broke it out. We sipped it, and I'm not a fan of Jägermeister, but it has kind of that licoricey, it's funky, it's interesting. And so you can blend that with other things. So you could just sip it as an after dinner libation for tummy digestion, or you can mix it with other things. And there's recipes out there for that. In high-end bars, 5-star bars that have those expensive infused drinks, this is one that I think they make a Manhattan out of in New York. Traditionally uses bitters, and bitters. That's what this is. You're making a bitter. The best time to make an ochino is in late May or early June, like I told you. The shells aren't hard, so this is easy to cut open. And here you can see the developing nut. So you can just quarter them or half them and then put them in a jar, cover it with vodka, and that's it. I just did straight up husks in mine, but this recipe, they're adding things like cinnamon sticks and orange zest and things like that. But I didn't necessarily want my nocino to taste like a Christmas drink. I wanted to find out what the pure essence of the black walnut tasted like. But there's no reason you can't do this too, because I'm telling you, it's going to be good too. Yeah, here's your black walnut, an old fashioned. That's what I'm thinking of, which is a quarter cup of whiskey, quarter cup of black walnut liqueur, some aromatic bitters, and they'll charge you $20 for that drink, or maybe 25 in a high-end bar in New York City. Or you can make green walnut molasses, which is basically the unripe black walnuts, just like we did with the Mogolio. You're taking those same things, and there's recipes online, just look it up. You're just taking no water added, the turbinado organic sugar. I don't know if it's equal parts or not. I'd have to look up the recipe again. And again, the same thing through osmosis, the sugar is going to pull the moisture out of those unripe black walnuts, and then you're going to strain it and make a thick syrup or a molasses out of it. How cool is that, right? Yeah, allow the walnut sugar to sit at room temperature for 30 days, up to a few months. Open the jar occasionally, release carbon dioxide because this mixture is going to ferment, and it's going to give it some nice funky notes too. You can scrape that sugary walnut mixture into a pot and bring it to a boil, then strain out the walnuts, and then of course put your temperature thermometer in there and get it to that syrup temperature, and make it shelf stable, and jar it and give it to friends or yourself. And of course, use anywhere you use maple syrup, and it loves yogurt and creamy soft cheeses, goat cheeses, or baking in things like granola. How fun is that, right? Who would have thunk it? And we're not done with black walnut. According to researchers, the walnut leaves have bacteria killing and anti-parasitic properties. People have been using herbal rinses. Herbalists know about this for centuries for their hair, preferring walnut leaves above all the others for the way it smells and the way it tightens the scalp. It's like a spa treatment for free in your own home. So I challenge you, remember this with your favorite black walnut growing nearby. Pluck some leaves off like this little girl did. Steep them in some water or dry them for later use, just like you see in this picture, and create a strong tea that you can use for a hair rinse rather than the hard water you have in coming out of your faucet. Yeah, decoction, which is basically a boiled tea from the leaves, it can also be used for external applications for a variety of skin complaints, including ringworm, psoriasis, eczema, jock itch, athlete's foot, you name it, right? So that antibacterial and antifungal properties of the leaves is also in the black walnut hulls that you make the nocino out of, and it's also in the fruit or the nut meat that you eat. Nature's benefit. Isn't it a cool thing? Not only is walnut leaf tincture good for cleansing your digestive tract, but it can also help your teeth and gums as well. Go figure. So you're making a walnut leaf tincture, which is basically steeping the dried leaves in alcohol, high enough proof alcohol like vodka or rum or gin, 80%, and steeping it for 30 days and straining it out, and that tincture will last you for decades. You can even buy walnut shell powder online. Shell powder people are using for a scrub, exfoliating, moisturizing, cleansing skin, reducing scars, tones the skin. Would you have ever thought that? I thought walnut shells were only used for polishing things. And I think I've read or heard about a company in Missouri that creates walnut shell powder. They have at least a dozen different sizes that they grind it into for a dozen different uses of that powder. That's pretty impressive to me. Black walnut hull powder can be made into an infusion and added to other bath products, used as a facial mask or a bath bomb. You can look up bath bomb recipes, or you can infuse it in massage oils, just on and on. Intrigued yet? A tincture can also be made from highly potent green hulls or the black walnut tree. So yes, you can make a nocino, or you can just tincture the green hulls. What I mean by that is when I'm harvesting the green hulls in the fall, I'm harvesting to get the fruit when the hulls are still green. If I can dent that fruit with my thumb, I know the nut meat inside is ready to roll. So I'm not waiting for that thing to turn yellow and black. I'm harvesting it when it's green. And then I'm just rolling that green husk, that whole fruit under my foot, and the husk just comes right off that nut. And then I'm saving that husk and I'm drying it on screens. And then once it's dry, you can grind it into a powder. Or you can take those green hulls, dry them, and then add them and make a tincture out of it. So that green hull contains up to 10 times the amounts of juglone. Whoa, wait a minute. Why would I want that juglone in a tincture? Well, that's the essential ingredient in the tincture. Due to its antibacterial properties, black walnut extract is used in wormwood complex supplements. Wormwood complex is a tincture made from black walnut hulls, a plant called wormwood and cloves. So that's a parasite killing thing, that tincture. Antiviral, antibacterial. Some herbalists use them as part of an anti-cancer protocol. So look it up. You can actually order this product online. Make it yourself. You don't need to spend, I don't even want to know what they're charging for that 4 ounce bottle right there. Then we got hickory nuts. Man, oh man, I got 3 minutes left. See what I mean, Morgan? All right, I'm gonna bypass through and get to. You can make syrup out of the hickory bark. Look it up online. There's the bark. Yes, you have to clean it, and yes, you have to bake it. You can actually order hickory syrup online. There's the nut meat. Again, incredibly nutritious. Yes, we can grow hickories. We should be growing them in Nebraska. The husks can be used to roast meat. And then canucci is a recipe I found out. It comes from the Cherokee Nation. A canona. There's actually a YouTube video online to make your own homemade canona. And one of these days, I recommend making it. Something tells me, Brian, you are the man to make a homemade canona and sell them online. Anyway, it's a giant wooden mortar and pestle. You place the nut meat, shells, everything into that mortar, and the nuts were pulverized down and then formed into a ball. And then that ball was cooked and made into a soup. And I've made canucci soup before. It is rich, it is nutty. So after you cook it down, all those little shell pieces and parts in there, you just strain in a cheesecloth. And now you're left with this beautiful, creamy based soup that you can add to recipes. I'm telling you what, it is the cat's meow. Okay, so we're going to end it on canucci and yeah, and call it there. I hope you guys got inspired tonight and intrigued about looking some of these things up yourself online. There's so much to learn in so little time. I'm convinced with foraging and growing things in your landscape, as you can see, it's not just about eggplant. It's not just about summer squash. Yes, grow those too, but there's so much of nature's bounty right out there under our nose. And Sandra, I would just say to you, look up those YouTube videos on wild edible plants in Nebraska. It's a three-part series, so don't get too bored listening to it, but I cover a lot of these things in there. Meaning you don't have to think about it going, wait a minute, I want to learn more about this. Unfortunately, Sandra, there's not a lot of folks out there in Nebraska that are talking about wild edible plants, and that I can think of. If anybody knows of one, please let me know. I decided a number of years ago, since nobody's doing this, by golly, I'm going to. And I've found that you don't know what you don't know what you don't know, and it's just like crazy. You'll never be done learning about plants. That's the beauty of horticulture. You'll never be done. So if you like lifelong learning, dive into it.
Alrighty. Um, Thank you again, Bob, for everything. As usual, time, we just never seem to have enough. But like you said, we do have those posted on there. And then, Bob, my only final comment would be is if anybody wanted to reach out to you regarding more information, is there an email or anything, or just a general area they could go to if they had more questions for follow up?
Yeah, if you can remember this, unfortunately my darn camera is not there anymore. But yeah, one thing, just you can just email the statewide arboretum. If you go to our website and contact us, there's kind of a general email there, and they'll just forward it to me. And then my personal email is R as in Robert, and then Henrickson is HenrickSon. So R Henrickson, numeral 2 at unl.edu. Thanks, Paige. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate your comments, you guys.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Bob. Have a great evening, and everyone for attending. Thank you very much. If you missed anything, this will be up on the Conservation Nebraska YouTube page. And have a wonderful night.
Be patient on the YouTube page.
Yes, yes, but it will be there.
We'll be there.
Promise.
We'll be there. You got March yet, people. You can't harvest yet anything. You got time. You got time.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.